QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Class tracking for business and personal in one QuickBooks file. We're going to set up the QuickBooks file to do that here. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are on the desktop. We have our QuickBooks program here. We're going to be opening up the QuickBooks program. We're going to set up a new data file that we can practice using class tracking to break out the business and personal expenses and income. If you're using your company file, or you typically have your company file open, you want to make sure you can locate the company file so you know where it is, and then we'll create a new company file to practice with the class tracking here. And we'll be able to see how to do that as we set up this process. So once I get the data file set up, I want to put the data file in this folder so I know where it is located. Going to be opening up the QuickBooks program. It will typically open up to the last file that we were working in, the last data QuickBooks file we were working in. Here we are in QuickBooks. We have the last program open. Now I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this data file out without closing QuickBooks entirely. You don't have to do this necessarily because you can create a new company file from here, which will then close this company file and start a new one by going to the file dropdown and simply going to new company from this point in time. But it might be useful first to close the company file. So we close the company file while still having the QuickBooks program open. That'll take us to our typical kind of input screen or first screen before any company is open, which includes the recently opened items here. Now this is where you can go to find your location, or where I typically go to find the location of the recently opened file, so I at least know where they are. So I'm going to hover over it, and then there's going to be the location. So I would take a screenshot of that and then go and find that file and make sure that I know where it is. So if you're working with your own company file, then it's probably going to show up here in the recently opened items and you'll be okay, but it's useful to know where it is. I find a lot of people don't know where the company file is, and you want to know where it is in case the software loses its memory of where the file was located, and you can go physically get it. So you can see the mapping here. Now when we set up the new company file, it'll just put it somewhere. Once again, QuickBooks will just kind of put it somewhere, and then we're going to go find it, and I'm going to put it right where we want to put it, which is in that folder. That's where I want to put it. So let's go ahead and open up a new one. I'm going to go to the file dropdown. We're going to set up a new company. So set up a new company here. I'm going to set it up for somebody else because I want to use different credentials rather than the defaults that I have with Intuit. And I'm going to set this as a business and personal class tracking file. And then the industry that I'm going to have, I'm going to make this a service industry. I'll just make it like a general service industry. So I'm going to say general service. This will be the income statement to the right. So I'm going to basically assume here, the assumption being that I want to track my personal information in QuickBooks to have an idea of what's going on personally, and the business information to have some ideas, to have my information that I need to track my business and to do my tax preparation needs at the end of the year. This is an area that if you were to ask a CPA, tax preparer, bookkeeper, they would probably say, I want you to use two different QuickBooks files, which is often a good internal control. But if you have like a small Schedule C or something like that, it's easier to kind of do it in one file. So if you wanted to do that, you could use the class trackings to do that. So I recommend talking to your CPA and whatnot before moving forward with that. But this is an option. So we're going to be setting this up here, and we're going to say that the business type is going to be, let's say, sole proprietorship. And then I don't need any of this other information just to practice the class tracking. So I'm just going to put the email in here, and then I'm going to continue on and set up this data file. So we're all set, it says here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this back out. I'm going to close this out. We don't need that. I'm not going to buy any payroll or anything. I'm going to maximize the open windows. I'm going to go to the view up top. I'm going to say open windows so we can see the open windows. Now note that the reason that many bookkeepers and accountants don't like the idea of having the company file and the business file in the same QuickBooks file is because they want to have that separation. You want to have that separation between the business and personal. And it seems like the classes are not as strong. You know, the stronger you can make the separation, the better. And if you're a bookkeeper, then you want to make that separation as strong as possible to make the bookkeeping easy. Because if I'm doing bookkeeping for somebody else, it becomes very difficult if I'm looking at their personal expenses on what they spent stuff on and trying to determine if it's business or personal, or where it should go there. But you can do that kind of the separation with basically class tracking on the income statement side of things, which is basically what you would need for like a Schedule C type of tax return. So lining up the income statement on the business and personal. It is also possible to set up two checking accounts, even when using the same QuickBooks file. So you still might be able to set up another kind of differentiation, which is typically recommended, having a business checking account and a personal checking account, even though you're running them basically in the same QuickBooks file, so that everything that goes through the business account, we can assume then is business related, and then we can apply it to the business class and everything that's going through the personal account. So you could still kind of have some checks that will be involved there to separate. But also note, if I go to the lists dropdown and the chart of accounts, then the standard type of chart of accounts is the chart of accounts that we would typically think of for a business. Personal expenses could differ. You might have some personal expenses like, restaurants or just, fun time or, or something like that, because the objective of your personal expenses is not the same as the objective of the expenses for a business, which is to generate revenue. Personal expenses are there to live well or whatnot. And therefore you may have some personal expenses, of course, that will not line up to the same kind of categorization. So that means you're going to have kind of a longer chart of accounts, including a chart of accounts that includes normal business type of stuff, and some chart of accounts that are going to include personal type of items as well. Let's go ahead and turn on the class tracking while we're here. So this is going to be the major tool we will have. We're going to go to the edit dropdown, preferences. We're going to go to the accounting up top. We want to go to the company preferences, and then you want to be using class tracking. I want to have the prompt on to tell me that if I didn't assign a class, and this means that basically every transaction we put in place, we're going to assign to some kind of class. So I'm going to say okay. So class tracking is now on. You can kind of tell that if you go back to the home page up top and you were to enter like a check, it's going to make me set up a bank account to do this. But if I set up a check, then I need to set up a bank account. So I'm going to say, okay, I need a checking account. It's going to be a bank account type. I'm going to call it checking. And again, you might want the added internal control of having two checking accounts, business, personal, even though you're using the one file. And then when your business account, gets enough money in it, you transfer from the business to the personal. We're going to use one account, however, the bank account here. And so I'm going to say save. And now we have here our classes. So we have our class field, which is now in the data input screen, would not be there if you didn't turn on the class tracking. Let's close this back out. Let's just double check where this file is located now. I'm going to go to the file dropdown. I'm going to say that I want to close the company, not the whole QuickBooks system, but just to close the company file to take us back into that intro screen where we have the recently opened files. I like to hover over this. And note, QuickBooks just put this company file somewhere. I see where it's at now. I'm going to go find it, and then I'm going to go put it where I want it to be. Note that in order to cut and paste and move a company file, you cannot be in the company file, such as we are not here. We're not in the company file. We're in QuickBooks, but no company file is open. Therefore, I should be able to find the company file and move it to where we would like it. So here we are back on the desktop. Now we have our program over here, our company file. I've now cut and pasted to our folder where I'd like to have it. Notice it's a QBW file. It's similar in a relationship to like a Word document as to the Microsoft Word program. In other words, if I was to open up the Word document, it would then open up the Microsoft program and the document within it. If I double click on the QBW file, it will open up in this case, QuickBooks program, and then the data file within it. Obviously, the QuickBooks data files are much larger than a Word document, but you have that same kind of relationship where you have the program that's going to be running the data file within it as you open it. So most people will open up the QuickBooks program first, which will be running the prior data file, which is often the one that people are working with all the time, so they don't need to make any changes. But you can just double click on the data file too, which is a QBW file.